Reese Valerian stood on the cracked viewport of the salvage tender and watched the stars flicker across the graveyard. Tens of thousands of hulls, battleships, harvest freighters, courier, needles drifted around the dead moon of Helmsgarth like frozen fish scales. Gray, pitted metal gleaming where micrometeors had planed away paint and sigils. Lights from Reese's tug ship cut narrow cones through the darkness, illuminating names scorched away by plasma burn. These had once been the pride of the Coalition Navy, vessels that had fought the Autarch Dominion to a standstill until the day the Dominion's antimatter warheads fell. Afterward, the victors towed the wrecks here to orbit forever in mute humiliation. Reese keyed the comms. Approach vector verified. Autonomous beacon confirmed docking lock. Static crackled back. Then the salvage tender's elderly synth voice responded. Lock confirmed. Important. Remain on designated lattice. Unlicensed deviation punishable under Treaty 27. Reese suppressed a laugh. The tender still enforced rules that had died with its builders. No Dominion patrol had visited Helmsgarth in 4 years. He pushed off from the viewport, boots mag-clamping to the grated deck. The ragtag crew of refugees he'd gathered waited by the cargo hatch. Lyra with her jury-rigged railgun, Starn clutching a datapad showing power budgets, and 2 gaunt adolescents who'd lied about their ages just to escape the Dominion's labor camps. All of them watched him the way the terminally ill watch a surgeon, with equal parts terror and desperate hope. Once we're latched, we cut power, Reese said. If any Dominion recon boys swing past, we'll look like another ghost. Understood? Nods. No one asked questions. They trusted Reese's plan, because they had no alternative. He, alone, carried the Necropolis circuit, a fist-size polyhedral artifact, rumored to be stolen from the Dominion's own cryptotech lab. Was Rose Harrow, the dissident scientist who had hidden it inside his ribcage before she bled out during interrogation, who'd whispered the last instructions. The circuit wakes the dead, Reese. Not flesh, but steel. Give our ships a second death, one that serves us. He had never tested it. Tonight the Dominion Armada was pushing toward Freeport Meridian, a rebel habitat with 1 million civilians. If the graveyard did not become a fleet before dawn, Meridian would be slashed. Eglocks clanged. Outside, the salvage tender's clamp bit into the shattered flank of a cruiser named Meridian's Promise. A good omen, Riss hoped. Air hissed from the hatch. They entered the corpse ship single file, switching to suit lights. Inside, cables dangled like petrified entrails. Machinery panels were gutted. The Dominion had stripped anything reparable before towing her here. But Riss didn't need intact power cores or pristine processors. He needed only mass, geometry, and the whisper that remained inside every shipboard intelligence after it died. They reached the primary data spine, 6 parallel conduits as thick as trees. Reese removed a toolkit from his belt, then unslung the case holding the circuit. Metal facets, black as a starless void, glistened under his wrist lamp. The artifact pulsed with heat, though no power fed it. Every time he touched it, he felt a second heartbeat overlapping his own. Starn, he said, splice the circuit into the core comm trunk. Port 14B, Starn swallowed. 14B feeds the ship's necrocache. Dominion regulators wove malware in there. We open it, you might wake more than drones. That's the idea. A beat of silence. Then Starn pulled a cable cutter. Race opened a channel on his suit speakers so everyone could hear. We're lighting up a signal net across the entire graveyard. The circuit acts like a plague. It hawks from hull to hull, ignoring authentication. He tried to sound assured. The Dominion called it an abomination. They banned its use. That's why it's perfect. Fiberglass insulation floated around them as Starn peeled back the conduit sheath. When the inner bus was exposed, Reese shoved the circuit against copper contacts. The artifact sank into the metal as if it were warm wax, then vanished, leaving behind only tendrils of black corrosion that raced along the cables. The lights died. Suit HUDs flickered. Then an unfamiliar glyph crawled across every visor, a stylized rib cage enclosing a starburst. Lyra's voice cracked over comms. Core power spiking 30%, 40. Gots, the mains are cold. Where's it getting juice? Reese watched rusted coolant pipes vibrate. Distant thuds rolled through the hull, echoing like drums. One by one, dormant capacitors that the Dominion's scrappers had overlooked began disgorging their stored charge. But the numbers climbing on Starn's pad were too high for old capacitors alone. The circuit's feeding on us, Starn said, fear edging his tone. It's converting matter. A low tremor cut him off. Meridian's promise rotated, nudged by newborn thrusters that hadn't existed minutes earlier. Outside the portholes, Reese could see blue candles of plasma spitting from the cruiser's exhaust manifold. Not Dominion radiant Dreath blue, but an eerie bone white. Across the graveyard, other hulls flared, tiny blossoms in the dark. The fleet was waking. Reese switched to wideband transmission. All units of Helmsgarth Graveyard, this is Necroprogrammer Valerian. Your war is not over. Follow my markers. No, Captain AI's replied. Those had been yank-ripped. Instead, he felt something older answer, a presence he sensed through the circuit's link. It was not sapient, but it was hungry, and it recognized him as Shepherd. The circuit carried his command as scent carries in water. The crew stumbled back to the tender. Artificial gravity surged, failed, surged again as Meridian's promise aligned herself toward distant space. By the time Reese sealed the hatch, 30 hulls had already formed a ragged spearhead, drifting under skeletal power. Frigate ribs glimmered where plates had been torn off, yet their rail emplacements were lit. Scorched muzzles turned like yawning jaws. Plotting intercept, Reese ordered. Lyra's railgun crew clung to jump seats. Intercept with whom? Reese projected a holomap. The Dominion Armada appeared as a crimson arrow sweeping from the upper ecliptic toward Meridian. Even at max burn, his resurrected fleet would arrive seconds before the Dominion's did. We're buying time. The tender scramjets ignited, hitching them to the cruiser's wake. G-forces pressed Reese into his harness. Bones creaked. Through the aft cam, he saw the rest of the graveyard ignite. Hundreds of engines lighting in silence. A cemetery turned comet swarm. The Necropolis circuit stitched them together into a mesh network, faster than he could tag subsectors. It rewrote code, cannibalized dormant drive capacitors for exotic fuel, and patched holes with self-forging lattice grown directly from hull rust. Yet power breeds ghosts. Halfway to the Meridian, line where free space ended and Dominion kill volumes began, Reese felt the first pushback. A query whispered down the circuit, tonal and indistinct. What authority commands the dead? He shivered. The voice wasn't Dominion. It was the hulls, the feral amalgam of half-erased nav demons, emergency routines, and dregs of shipboard personalities long since deleted. The circuit had bound them, but their new awareness groped for purpose. The circuit had bound them, but their new awareness groped for purpose. Reese keyed his neural implant, letting his thoughts ride the return ping. I am your programmer. You are soldiers of the Coalition once more. Purpose? Defend Meridian. The voice dissolved into static like a tide going out. Engines brightened, accepting the order. But Reese sensed the question lingering, unfinished. Ahead, first contact alarms shrieked. Dominion picket corvettes had scrambled a screen. Sleek, living alloy hulls, each with antimatter lances primed. They expected salvage hulks. They got specters. Meridian's promise sailed at the vanguard. Her spinal rail, once melted into slag, was now a bone-white cannon that fired shards of compressed dusk matter, whatever alchemy the circuit had conjured from scrap and rust. The first shard punched through a corvette amidships. The Dominion ship flowered open like a steel rose, silent fire venting in ribbons. Lyra hoobed. One! Other graveyard ships volleyed. Where plating was missing, extruded rib beams flexed and hurled themselves as spears. The corvettes erupted into shrapnel. But Dominion heavy cruisers advanced behind them, shields overlapping. The tender rattled with impact. An energy beam grazed their flank. Reese's HUD flared warning red. "Keep us tucked behind Promise's dorsal shadow," Starn screamed. "Promise's reactor spike. She's destabilizing." Reese looked. White light gushed from vents all along Promise's spine. The circuit was overdriving the ancient reactor beyond safe threshold. The ship was becoming a missile. "Helm, vector Promise toward that cruiser," he barked. No human helmsman answered, but the dead ship obeyed. She accelerated, transit drives shrieking in frequencies that made Reese's teeth buzz. Seconds later, Promise rammed the Dominion flagship. The collision triggered a chain reaction flash so bright the tender's autoshades blacked out the viewport. When the glare subsided, two hulls drifted as fused sculpture, molten edges cooling into glass. Cheers filled the comm as graveyard vessels poured past the wreckage. Dominion lines broke formation, but victory was not yet secure. Long-range sensors showed 3 Dominion dreadnoughts still inbound, each bristling with Nova torpedoes. If they reached firing position, Meridian would burn, no matter how many corvettes Reese shattered. He opened the circuit channel again. "Necropolis Fleet, Priority Delta, Objective, seize dreadnoughts or disable." The previously destroyed voice replied instantly, louder. "We are the Coalition's Wraith. We hunger." Reese sensed more coherence, as if each kill on the battlefield fed the fleet a memory of war. The danger surfaced in his mind like a dorsal fin. The circuit enlivened, but did not restrain. If the fleet's hunger turned feral, it might chew through Dominion and Coalition alike until nothing remained. Needed an anchor, something to teach these revenant codes the difference between vengeance and victory. Inspiration struck. Reese fished out a tattered data crystal from his pocket. Helmsgarth hymnals, recordings of the last broadcast from the station choir before the Dominion bombs fell. He had salvaged it years ago, intending to play it at the graves of friends. Instead, he slid the crystal into the tender's comm deck and linked it into the circuit's core. Choral voices leaked across every band. Children, elders, engineers, the living memory of the ship's crews. Notes drifted through cobalt harmonies, a song of homecoming. The Ghost Fleet paused mid-maneuver as though struck still by the sound. The hungry static softened. "Remember," Reese urged across the link, "you carried these people. You sheltered them. Carry them again." The dreadnoughts approached, shadows blotting star fields. Their torpedo bays glowed sulfur orange. The Necropolis Fleet reformed. Not frenzied, but disciplined. The largest hulks, planet cracker bulkers once meant to ferry ore, interposed themselves in a shield wall. Turrets extruded along their keels. Smaller destroyers dove through lattice gaps, weaving embossed spiral patterns that no Dominion tactical model could anticipate. The circuit fed on the hymn and knitted it into guidance algorithm. Every note corresponded to a vector, a cadence of Delta VN railfire. Torpedoes erupted from the dreadnoughts, spheres of miniaturized suns. They howled toward the bulkers. Choral crescendo soared an alto's pure strand, and the bulker trio pivoted, sacrificing crusted bow armor. Explosions bloomed against their fronts, but the ships held, their frames reinforced by new architects of bone metal, grown instantaneously from within. Return fire roared. Dusk matter spears shredded dreadnought plating. Beam lattices carved runes of white heat across shield membranes. One dreadnought attempted to retreat, venting reaction mass, but a swarm of frigate wraiths latched onto its hull like remoras, chewing through decks and severing power conduits until its lights failed. Riss watched his tactical board. The second dreadnought's torpedo magazine cracked. Shockwaves tore the giant craft in half. The third, however, unleashed a final salvo directly at Meridian. Impossible to intercept in time. Reese snapped. "All units, code black Shepherd. Intercept manually." His eyes fell on their own salvage tender. Tiny, fragile, but within sprint range of the torpedoes. Lyra saw his gaze. "No," she whispered. "We've no shielding." "We're the only ship close enough," Rhys said. His throat tightened. All his life he'd run salvage, always skirting the line between cowardice and survival. Now the line was gone. "Prep override," Starn answered by slaving the tender's reactors to Rhys's controls. They overrode safeties. Alarms bellowed. The circuit sensed intent. Tendrils of black lightning crawled across the tender's hull, reinforcing bulkheads, reshaping valves. The ship groaned, metal screaming as if unwilling. But it adapted. Rhys rammed throttle. The tender lurched, bucking past pieces of still glowing wreckage. Ahead, torpedoes streaked, each a ball of swirling orange, each enough to pierce Meridian's climate domes and boil her oceans of recycled water. He broadcast wide. "Circuit convert hull to ablative matrix. Absorb blast." The presence hesitated. Self-sacrifice was not encoded in hunger. Rhys closed his eyes and forced a memory into the link. The face of Rose Harrell, bleeding on interrogation tiles, whispering, "Live them again, Rhys. Give them another sunrise." He poured grief, hope, every emotion into the circuit's conduits. The ghost fleet felt it like a flare in dark water. "Agreed," it answered. Transmutation cascaded. The tender's outer plates liquefied, re-solidified into razor-thin petals that layered forward, crafting a flower shield. Engines flared bone white. They slammed into the torpedo envelope. Light. Pressure. Rhys's harness cracked 3 ribs. A scream to the left. Someone flung against bulkhead. Systems blew out. But the torpedo's core detonations muffled, their energy devoured by the circus improvised shield that flaked away layer by layer. When Rhys's eyes cleared, the stars remained. Behind him, Meridian loomed, unscarred. The tender floated, half of it missing. Breach alarms moaned. Yet, they were alive. Lara coughed blood but raised a fist. Still here. On the board, the 3rd dreadnought died beneath concentrated ghost fire. Cheers across every channel, coalition and civilian alike. The Dominion Armada retreated, what little remained of its scattering and ragged vectors. The war was not won tonight, but Meridian was spared. In the sudden calm, Rhys felt the fleet's gaze turn inward. Without enemies, the hunger might resurface. He keyed the circuit. "You are free," he told the ghost host. "Return to rest or follow the living. Choice is yours." The hymn played on, soft now, almost gone. In response, the ships dimmed their engines. One by one, they set courses away from populated lanes, deeper into the starless gulf beyond the charts. Not to the graveyard they had outgrown that, but to some quiet quadrant where they could drift until even the circuit's impulse faded. Rhys watched them depart like mourners after a vigil. He realized tears were floating from his lashes, globes sparkling under emergency red lights. Starn wheezed. "They're leaving. What about the circuit?" "It goes with them," Rhys said. "It was made for death, not for victory parades." The last hull winked away, drive plume extinguishing like a candle. Only the crippled salvage tender, scattered coalition frigates, and half-molten Dominion debris remained. Sirens from Meridian began broadcasting thanks, coordinates for rescue tugs, medevac requests. Rhys exhaled, then keyed the tender's battered intercom. "All hands, damage report. Then set course to Meridian. We've a city to heal." As the engine shuddered back to life, Rhys reached into his vest and found the hole where the circus case had been. Nothing but dust remained. He brushed it free, and for the first time since Rose Harrow died, his chest felt light. Outside, dawn crested Meridian's horizon, a fragile ring of rose-gold light reflected from its habitat mirrors. A new sunrise, earned by the dead, delivered by the living. Rhys imagined Rose somewhere in that glow, nodding. He straightened, despite bruises and broken ribs, and guided the battered tender toward the light.